The rain was coming down so hard that Rourke almost drove past her. She was standing on the shoulder of Highway 87, 40 miles east of Roundup, Montana, in the middle of a storm that had turned the whole world gray. A single leather suitcase at her feet, a rain-soaked travel coat pulled tight around her. Long dark hair stuck to her cheeks. She wasn't waving. She wasn't yelling. She was just standing there, looking at his truck as it came around the bend, like she had been waiting for him specifically. Cole eased his foot off the accelerator. Every instinct he had told him to keep driving. He was 55 years old, a widower, and he lived alone on 2,000 acres of Montana ranch land. He had learned a long time ago that the world was full of stories that started with a good deed and ended somewhere much darker. But the rain was heavy. She was alone, and something in the way she stood, still and patient in a storm most people would run from, made him press the brake. He pulled onto the shoulder, rolled down his passenger window an inch. She walked to the truck slowly, water running down her face, dark brown eyes calm in a way that did not match the situation. When she leaned toward the window, she did not say what strangers on empty highways usually say. She did not ask for a ride. She did not apologize. She did not explain. She said one word. Maribel. Cole's hands went still on the steering wheel. Maribel was his wife's name. Maribel Rourke, dead for 2 years, buried on the ranch, under a cottonwood tree she used to sit under every summer. Nobody outside the family said her name anymore. Nobody in Roundup ever really had. She had been a private woman. And this stranger, this drenched woman on the side of a Montana highway, had just said it like she had known her. Cole finally spoke. "Who are you?" The woman did not blink. "She sent me." But to understand why a stranger on Highway 87 knew the name of a woman who had been in the ground for 2 years, and to understand what happened when Cole Rourke opened that passenger door, we have to go back to the beginning. Back to the ranch. Back to Maribel. Back to the year everything Cole thought was true turned out to be a lie carefully told by the one person he trusted most. Cole Rourke was born on the Rourke Ranch outside Roundup, Montana, and had never lived anywhere else. His family had worked that land for 4 generations, since his great-grandfather claimed the original homestead in 1898. Cattle country, big sky country, the kind of place where a man's word is his fence line and the seasons teach you every lesson worth learning. Cole was a cowboy in the way the word used to mean something. Up before dawn, boots on, coffee black. He knew every ridge on his land the way most men know their own hands. He married Maribel Hollis when he was 29 and she was 26. She was a soft-spoken woman with quiet eyes and the kind of laugh that made a hard day easier. She was not born to ranch life, but she took to it the way certain people take to the right home. She kept the books. She kept the peace. She kept Cole steady through the years the market crashed, the years the drought came, and the years the herd nearly failed. For 24 years, she was the whole quiet architecture of his life. Maribel had 1 child from a first marriage, a boy named Waylon. Cole raised him from the age of 4, taught him to ride, taught him to work the herd, sent him to college in Bozeman when the ranch could barely afford it. Waylon was not blood, but Cole never used that word. To him, Waylon was his son. Simple as that. But here is the thing about raising a child who is not your blood. You can love them completely. You can give them everything. And you can still miss the moment when they start looking at your life not as home, but as inheritance. Waylon came back from college with a business degree and a smoother way of talking than he had left with. He offered to take over the ranch's finances. Cole was in his early 50s then, tired from decades of physical work and grateful for the help. He handed over the books, the trust paperwork, the bank access, all of it. Maribel did not like it. Cole remembered her standing in the kitchen one evening, drying her hands on a dish towel, watching Waylon drive away after a long meeting about restructuring the ranch's assets. She said quietly, "Cole, watch that boy." Cole laughed. He said, "He's our son, Maribel. He's helping." Maribel did not laugh. She said, "He's helping himself. You just haven't seen it yet." That was the last real disagreement they ever had about Waylon. Because 6 months later, Maribel got sick. The doctors called it a rare autoimmune condition. It moved slowly at first, then faster. Within a year, Maribel could not walk without help. Within 18 months, she needed round-the-clock care. Cole hired a nurse to come to the ranch 3 days a week. He rearranged his life. He learned how to lift her, how to feed her, how to sit with her through the long, quiet afternoons when she was too tired to talk. But then Waylon came to him one evening with a proposal. He said the ranch could not sustain both the medical costs and the operational demands. He said there was a specialized care facility in Oregon that had experimental treatment protocols for Maribel's condition. He said the facility had a waiting list, but he had used his connections to get her a spot. He said it would give her the best chance. Cole was exhausted. He had watched his wife decline for 2 years. He wanted to believe there was still a chance. Therefore, he agreed. Waylon handled all the arrangements. The transport, the paperwork, the financials. Cole flew out to Oregon with Maribel and stayed for the first 3 days at the facility. It was clean, modern, professional. The staff was kind. Maribel was settled into a private room with a view of pine trees. When Cole left to fly back to Montana, Maribel held his hand. She looked at him with those quiet eyes and said, "Cole, remember what I told you. Watch that boy." He kissed her forehead. He said, "I'll be back next week." He was not back next week, because 2 days after Cole returned to the ranch, Waylon called him with news. Maribel had taken a turn for the worse overnight. The facility had done everything they could. She had passed peacefully in her sleep. Cole did not believe it at first. He asked to speak to the facility. Waylon said the facility had already released the body to a mortuary in Oregon for transport. Waylon said he had handled everything. Waylon said Cole did not need to see her that way. Waylon said the best thing they could do was bring her home for a quiet burial on the ranch. Cole was in a fog. He had been away from her for less than a week. He agreed to everything Waylon suggested. He signed everything Waylon put in front of him. Maribel was buried on the ranch under the cottonwood tree 8 days later. And for 2 years, Cole believed that story. Before we go back to what really happened in that facility in Oregon, take a moment and tell us in the comments what town or city you're watching from today. And if you believe that every action carries a consequence, hit that subscribe button and join our community before the next case opens. The 2 years after Maribel's funeral were the quietest of Cole's life. He worked the ranch. He drank his coffee black. He talked to Maribel out loud when he passed the cottonwood tree, the way widowers do. He signed the papers Waylon brought him without reading them, because reading them reminded him of her, and because Waylon was his son and he trusted him, which was exactly what Waylon had been counting on. Because during those 2 years, quietly and carefully, Waylon Rourke had been restructuring the Rourke family trust. He moved assets into shell entities registered under his own name. He sold off the western grazing parcels through a private buyer arrangement that never crossed Cole's desk. He forged Cole's signature on documents transferring the mineral rights on the northern section to a company he secretly owned. He was not just skimming. He was preparing to inherit the whole ranch while his stepfather was still alive. And he had done one more thing. The story about Oregon had not been a coincidence. It had been the plan. Because in that facility, Maribel had not passed on the second day. She had lived for another 8 months. Alone, confused, told by staff that her husband knew where she was and had chosen not to come. Waylon had signed guardianship paperwork with forged documents claiming Cole had granted him medical power of attorney. He had cut Cole off from the facility entirely. He had told the staff Maribel's family was estranged. He had told Cole she was dead. And every month that Maribel remained alive in that facility, Waylon had been quietly using her still active signature authority on the trust to move more and more of the ranch into his own name. There was only one person Waylon had not accounted for. Her name was Delphine Carter. Delphine was 40 years old, a private care nurse who had been assigned to Maribel's room in the Oregon facility. She was tall and calm, with warm brown eyes and a way of speaking that made frightened patients breathe easier. She was a Black American woman who had spent 15 years in hospice care and had seen every kind of family and every kind of life families tell each other. And Delphine knew, from the first week, that something about Maribel Rourke's situation was wrong. Maribel was not a woman abandoned by her family. Delphine could tell, because Maribel talked about her husband every single day. She talked about the ranch. She talked about the cottonwood tree. She talked about Cole's coffee and Cole's boots and the way Cole hummed when he was fixing fence in the summer. Maribel was not a woman whose husband had walked away. Maribel was a woman whose husband did not know where she was. Delphine started asking questions. She checked the paperwork. She saw the guardianship documents signed by Waylon Rourke. She saw that Cole Rourke had never once called the facility. She saw that all communication was routed through Waylon. And one afternoon, sitting beside Maribel's bed, Delphine took her hand and said, "Maribel, I need you to tell me the truth. Does your husband know you're here?" Maribel looked at her for a long moment, and then she began to cry. For the next 6 months, until the day Maribel actually passed, Delphine became more than her nurse. She became her witness. Maribel gave Delphine everything: the name of the ranch, the address in Roundup, the name of every attorney the family had ever used. She gave Delphine her old journal, which she had kept hidden in her personal belongings, filled with entries about Waylon's growing control over the finances. She gave Delphine the names of 2 ranch hands who had worked for the family for decades and would recognize forged documents on sight. She gave Delphine a sealed envelope with a letter written in her own hand, addressed to Cole, to be delivered in person. And Maribel made Delphine promise one thing: find him. Tell him I never left. Maribel passed on a Tuesday in October. Waylon had her body transported to Montana within 48 hours. He told the facility that Cole was too distraught to be involved. He told Cole that Maribel had passed suddenly the week before, using a fabricated death certificate that predated her actual death by 7 months. Delphine attended Maribel's small memorial at the facility. She stood in the back and watched the paperwork get signed. She said nothing. Then she went home and started planning. It took Delphine Carter 18 months to build her case. She could not go to the police in Oregon. Waylon had been careful. The forged paperwork was good. The facility had been misled, but not obviously complicit. She needed corroborating evidence from Montana. She needed the 2 ranch hands. She needed the family attorney records. She needed a copy of the real trust documents. And most of all, she needed Cole Rourke to be ready to hear the truth without shutting down the moment she said it. Because she knew how this kind of grief worked. She had seen it in hospice for 15 years. If she showed up at Cole Rourke's front door with a folder full of documents and said, "Your son lied to you. Your wife lived for 8 more months without you, and everything you signed for the last 2 years was fraud," he would not believe her. He would defend Waylon. He would think she was a scammer. He would call the sheriff on her. She needed him to be off balance. She needed the truth to come from Maribel's voice, not hers. And she needed to meet him somewhere that was not the ranch, because at the ranch, Waylon would be watching. Therefore she waited for the right day. A day when Waylon would be out of town at a livestock auction in Billings. A day when Cole would be driving back alone from a supply run in Lewistown. A day when the weather forecast promised a storm heavy enough that a decent man would stop for a stranger on the road. Delphine drove her own car to a truck stop 12 miles east of where she planned to be picked up. She left it there. She walked the 12 miles in the rain, carrying her suitcase, until she reached the exact stretch of Highway 87 that Cole Rourke would drive down that afternoon. And she waited. She saw his headlights come around the bend. She stood still. She let the rain fall. She looked directly at his windshield. And when the truck slowed, she walked toward the passenger window with the calm of a woman who had been rehearsing this moment for a year and a half. She said his wife's name. She said, "She sent me." Cole Rourke sat frozen behind the steering wheel of his truck for what felt like a full minute. He was 55 years old. He had lost his wife 2 years ago. He had spent every one of those 730 days carrying a grief so familiar it felt like weather. And now a woman he had never seen before was standing in the rain saying his wife's name like it belonged in her mouth. He should have driven away. Any reasonable man would have driven away. But Cole Rourke was a man who had learned, from his father and from Maribel and from every quiet season on that ranch, that the truth almost never arrives politely. Sometimes it walks up to your window in the rain and says a name it should not know. He reached across the cab and opened the passenger door. Delphine climbed in. She set her suitcase between her knees. She did not thank him. She did not smile. She pulled a small sealed envelope out of the inside pocket of her rain-soaked coat and held it out to him. She said, "Before I explain anything, I need you to read this. It is in her handwriting. Then we can talk." Cole looked at the envelope. He recognized the paper. Maribel had used the same stationery for 20 years. He took it with a hand that had started to shake. He opened it. He unfolded a single page. The handwriting was Maribel's. There was no question. He knew the loops of her M's the way he knew his own reflection. The letter was short. "Cole, if you are reading this, then the woman standing in front of you did what I asked her to do. Her name is Delphine. She is telling you the truth. I did not pass when Waylon told you I did. I lived 8 more months in Oregon. I waited for you every day. Please forgive me for not fighting harder to reach you. I was too weak. But Delphine is not. She is everything. Watch that boy. I told you. Watch that boy. I love you. Always. Maribel." Cole read it twice. Then he read it a third time. The rain drummed on the roof of the truck. Delphine sat quietly beside him, giving him the space he needed. She had done this part of her job for 15 years. She knew what a person looked like when their world was rewriting itself in real time. When Cole finally spoke, his voice was low and hoarse. He said, "Tell me everything." And she did. Over the next 3 hours, sitting in a parked truck on the side of Highway 87 while the storm passed, Delphine Carter told Cole Rourke every single thing she knew. She told him about the facility. She told him about Maribel's 8 months. She told him about the guardianship forgery. She told him about the sealed journal, which was in her suitcase. She told him about the 2 ranch hands she had already contacted, Amos Kettler and Rye Bevan, who had worked for Cole for over 20 years each and had noticed paperwork inconsistencies for the last 3 years, but had been too afraid to say anything to Cole directly. She told him she had already retained a forensic accountant in Missoula who was prepared to audit the trust the moment Cole gave the word. Cole listened without interrupting. When she was done, he did not cry. He did not shout. He simply sat with his hands on the steering wheel and stared at the road ahead. Then he said, "Where is he right now?" Delphine said, "He's at the livestock auction in Billings. He gets back tomorrow evening." Cole nodded slowly. He said, "Then we have 28 hours." They did not go back to the ranch that night. Cole drove Delphine to a small motel outside Lewistown. He got 2 rooms. He made 3 phone calls. The first was to Amos Kettler. The second was to Rye Bevan. The third was to a family attorney in Bozeman named Halsey Boone, a woman his father had used 40 years ago and who Cole trusted more than any attorney Waylon had ever brought around. By 6 the next morning, Halsey Boone was on a plane to Lewistown. By 9, she was sitting in the motel room across from Cole and Delphine reviewing Maribel's journal, the forged guardianship documents, the fabricated death certificate, and a stack of trust modifications signed with Cole's forged signature over the last 2 years. Halsey looked up over her reading glasses and said, "Cole, this is not a small thing. This is felony fraud. This is theft. This is forgery. This is guardianship abuse. When we bring this forward, your stepson is going to lose everything he has built, and he is going to be prosecuted." Cole said, "Good." Halsey said, "You are sure?" Cole said, "Halsey, he told me my wife was dead while she was still breathing. He let her spend 8 months waiting for me, and then he buried her before I could even see her face. I am not just sure. I am overdue." By noon, Halsey had filed emergency motions with the district court in Yellowstone County. By 2, a temporary freeze had been placed on every account connected to the Rourke family trust. By 4, the sheriff in Roundup had been briefed. By 6, Amos Kettler and Rye Bevan had signed sworn affidavits confirming everything Delphine had brought forward. Waylon's flight from Billings landed at 8:30 that evening. He drove his truck home through the same country his stepfather had driven through the day before. He had no idea. He pulled into the ranch driveway around 9:45, still humming, phone in hand, checking auction prices. Cole was standing on the front porch waiting for him. Delphine was sitting in a chair beside him. Halsey Boone was standing in the doorway, and the sheriff's cruiser was parked around the side of the barn. Waylon got out of the truck. He looked at the porch. He looked at the strange woman sitting next to Cole. He looked at Halsey. He looked at the second set of headlights coming around the barn. His face changed. He started to say something. He said, Cole, whatever this is, whatever she told you. Cole cut him off. Cole's voice was calm, measured, unhurried. The voice of a man who had already made every decision he needed to make. Cole said, Waylon, she lived 8 more months. You told me she was gone. You buried her before I could see her. You took her name off the trust the same week you told me she was dead. Waylon's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Cole said, Your mother left you something, by the way. She wrote you a letter too. Halsey will read it to you at your arraignment. The sheriff stepped forward. Delphine stood up. She walked down the porch steps toward Waylon. She stopped in front of him. She looked at him with the same calm brown eyes that had looked at Maribel Rourke every morning for 8 months. She said, She told me to tell you one thing. She said, Watch that boy. She always knew. Then she turned and walked back to the porch. Waylon Rourke was arrested that night on his own front lawn. The case took 11 months to fully resolve. Waylon was charged with felony fraud, forgery, elder guardianship abuse, and theft exceeding $1 million. He was convicted on every count. He was sentenced to 12 years in a Montana state facility. Every asset he had moved into shell entities was returned to the Rourke Trust. The ranch was made whole. The forged trust modifications were vacated. Cole's name was restored to every document that had ever been altered without his knowledge. Delphine Carter testified at every hearing. She was calm. She was precise. She was exactly what Maribel had trusted her to be. Cole offered Delphine a job on the ranch after the trial ended. Not out of obligation. Out of recognition. He said Maribel would have wanted her close. Delphine turned it down, gently. She said her work was in hospice, with the ones who were still waiting for someone to find them. But she promised to visit. She kept that promise. Twice a year, every year, she drove out to the ranch to sit under the cottonwood tree with Cole and Maribel's memory. Cole had a new headstone made. The old one was accurate about the date on paper. The new one was accurate about the date on truth. Beneath Maribel's name, he had 8 words carved into the stone. She lived longer than they told him. Love. Here is the thing about the people who mistake your grief for weakness. They forget that grief is only the shape love takes when it cannot go anywhere. And love, given enough time and enough truth, always finds its way home. Waylon thought a story told smoothly enough could bury a woman twice. What he did not understand is that the kindness his mother showed to a stranger in a hospice room in Oregon was a debt the universe collects on. Every time. Some people find justice in a courtroom. Some find it in a letter. And some find it standing in the rain on the shoulder of Highway 87, holding a suitcase, waiting for the right man to slow down. If you stayed until the end, thank you. More stories from Breach and Balance are already on your screen. Click one now. And if you have not subscribed yet, do not miss what is coming next. See you there.